WCAMs, WCA, wireless connectivity for smart everything. So not only smart city, not only smart factory, smart building, smart everything. One sentence, one few seconds about who we are and what we do. So founded in 1994, the Wireless Communication Alliance, WCORG, is a non-profit business league dedicated to collaboration in the wireless industry. It started Silicon Valley, and now, thanks Zoom, we are worldwide. Our mission is easy. Our mission is to networking people. Thanks to our sponsors. Without the sponsors, it would not be possible that I would sit here and we would have this wonderful webinar and also the future webinars. So here you see only a handful of our sponsors: Google, Aspel, CRG, Wola, of course, IoT Nation, and others. Upcoming events. So we have a bunch of upcoming events in 2021 and then follow-outs in 2022. I read them very briefly. So we will have hardware security touches. Then we have our Oktoberfest, unfortunately at home event this year, IoT Gizmo and Gadget, where people and companies introduce their latest and greatest gizmos and gadgets. Unfortunately, like I said, we cannot have a live Oktoberfest. We will have Oktoberfest at home, like last year. Another one will be in October, Open Wi-Fi, the next Wi-Fi revolution. Then our flagship event, What's Hot, What's Not, in November, where venture capitalists and M&A professional will talk about the past 2021 and what will be in the future, what's hot, what's not. The end of the year will be a global wireless startup pitch event where startup companies have a few minutes to pitch their company and their ideas. The first 2021 event will be, like always, our annual Spectrum 5G event, followed by 6G, wireless power transfer, and so on. We will introduce it on our website and also in our next meeting. A little bit housekeeping, so please, and that is different from our meeting what we had before. So please Zoom the Q&A session. Raise your hand when you have a question, and you will be invited not to type your question. You will be invited to speak your questions, and the panel will hopefully have the chance and the knowledge also to answer the question. The presentations, if any, and recording will be available within 48 hours on our media like YouTube and also on LinkedIn and our website. Again, greetings to the world and thanks for being our guest. This time, mainly because of the time, what we have 9 a.m., it will be more European countries and participants. Also, special thanks to our partner IoT Nation. With the promo code WCA500, you will get a 30-day trial. And like always, we have a raffle. So this time we will have a floating globe with integrated lamp. So you must be present to win this raffle. And it will be probably time in about 80 minutes where we will have this raffle. With this, let's start. Wireless connectivity for smart cities. With this, our moderator is Pusan Tan. We have on the audio and on the panel, we have Paul Huskra, we have Jardine Luhmann and Florian Bonanati. With this, I think, Pusan, the show is yours. I stop sharing. You will see me back in about 80 minutes.
All right, thank you so much, Peter. Good morning, everyone, or good evening to our friends in Europe. Again, my name is Poisan Tam, and I'm with the EIT Hub in Silicon Valley. Today, we have a panel of experts talking about smart everything. Now, based in the Netherlands, Jardine Luhmann is an Enschede City Council strategic advisor who specializes in smart innovation applications. She launched a campaign to improve the usage of city data and applications. She spearheaded a project with the University of Twente at the University of Applied Sciences Saxion on real-time measuring of the city's groundwater levels. Hello, Gerine. And then we have, based in Berlin, Florian Bonanati. He is the founder and managing director of R3, a company providing deterministic wireless communications solutions focusing on low latency and ultra reliability. Before establishing R3 in 2015, he was with Roland Berger and the Boston Consulting Group, specializing in turnaround management, telecommunication, industrial goods, and manufacturing. Then last but not least, based in the Bay Area, Paul Hoekstra. He is a strategy execution consultant who leads the TNL USA Mobility Business Unit. Paul is working with the most innovative agencies and municipalities in North America as well as Europe, partnering with cities such as San Francisco, Portland, Amsterdam, Copenhagen, and Stockholm to strategize, plan, deliver, and operate the most advanced traffic flow engines. Now, I have some questions for the panelists, but I encourage you watching also to have your questions ready for them. If you like to pose your question, then please use the raise hand function, and then we will get to you. Or you can also type it in the Q&A box. So now let's start with the questions. So my first question is for all you panelists. What has been one significant development in smart everything over the past 5 years? And what do you predict will be a major innovation in the next 5 years? So who wants to take this question first?
I'd say ladies first.
Okay, thank you. I will start then. I think the most significant development in the last 5 years was, I think it, especially in the cities, that 5 years ago, smart city, smart everything was very innovation driven, very project driven, and everybody was confused that it didn't work. And now we are changed to more challenge driven and looking for the best innovations to the challenges of the cities. And that's the best way for a good success and make it bigger and grow smart city things. So I think that's the biggest, for me, it's the biggest development. And for the next 5 years, yeah, the use of data and the use of monitoring, wireless monitoring of everything, of grass roots even, gave a lot of opportunities to do things really different, especially in the cities and in how we do manage things. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerine. How about Florian?
Sure. Yeah. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me on that panel. Yeah, for me, one significant development in the last 5 years was especially the convergence of compute and connect into well, low-digit dollar numbers, which could then be integrated in a lot of products. So what I have observed was that tremendous amounts of kind of new products for connectivity arise in the last 5 years, and now we see services connected to that. If you can see, let's say, your home delivery, you can see it in real time when it's coming, or you can have you connect to your bike and so forth. So we have seen with this convergence a lot of products now being able to be profitable, and you see that in the markets. And in the next 5 years, I expect a lot is happening in the other areas where it's not just being connected, but also being connected where you have a kind of deterministic service behind that. So when it goes to smart cities, you need to have, let's say, more reliability in the networks, basically, to offer services in a large scale. And the other area is, which I have a lot of experience with, is smart manufacturing, where also the need for, let's say, more reliability in, let's say, also scaled networks arising from machines and controls is getting more and more important, and that's what I expect to see as well.
Thank you, Florian. Yeah, it's like you're mentioning, like everything is a lot more connected. The world is a lot more connected, but we really need the reliability of that connection, right, to have that all happen. How about Paul? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think the broad picture, I can't agree more what Gerdine and Florian already articulated. And I think specific for traffic flow management, right, that connectivity is really, really important. Yeah, so we are working on with a traffic flow engine that takes in massive amount of data, pretty much from wherever we can get it. It can be a backend system where we retrieve how many people are on a bus, right? Because we want to prioritize that bus over another bus that has less people on it, right? But we also want to know, are they ahead of schedule or behind schedule? Because maybe that overrules, again, those kinds of numbers. But you can only get it when the bus broadcasts that kind of data. Yeah, so that's the starting point, right? And then we take that to optimize based on the mode and which road you're on, the priority. Yeah, and we're starting to do very interesting, advanced things that I think are going to really materialize, maybe not over the next 5 years, but I think we're going to definitely go into that direction. Is, for example, we are starting this pilot project also together with Nissan, where we're going to integrate their cars into our solution. So we will get the information of where their test autonomous vehicles want to go, and we're going to tell them, because we know the situation in the streets, right? When you take a right, I can already tell you there's a pedestrian about to cross, and the cars can take that into consideration when they take a right. And we can also tell them, no, don't take a right here because you're going to run into a traffic jam, right? Go the next one, right? And all those kinds of connectivities, yeah, in the end, are really possible right now at scale. Yeah, it's not cheap, yeah, but it is it becomes more and more reasonable to think about these initiatives. So over the next 5 years, I think we're going to really talk about how do we package the different solutions. Yeah, how do we make sure everything reliably? We can't have one point of failure in the communication or anywhere else. Yeah, and how do we scale that to, just in the United States, we have 18,000 municipalities, right? It is now that we are going, yeah, we can start stamping this stuff out. Our ability to have the people to help with these kinds of implementations might be actually the bottleneck, no longer the technology.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very, very interesting. And it's also, it really is everything, right? It's smart everything. There's so many components, so many connections. You have to be, there's the component of reliability. There's a lot of data. So all very interesting what has happened in the past 5 years and what we're going to see in the next coming years. Thank you. So my next question. So in this realm, right, of smart everything, which companies are developing the most in the IoT smart market, and what are they doing? So can you touch upon some of the companies that you've come across and you want to share with us? Who wants to start first? Should I just call on someone?
I'll go first. So we in San Francisco, together with the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency, we've had the opportunity to look at the market and kind of like have a broad understanding of what's going on. The companies that are heavily engaged are companies still like the Ciscos of the world. And they provide typically the backbone, security for the network, those kinds of infrastructure, hardcore, pull wire services. Yeah, and they are investing into pushing from those platforms up. Yeah, and do that a lot through partnerships. I think that's definitely there. The compute players, yeah, they are very seriously looking at this. The AWSs of the world. It just takes a lot of processing, right? So that's happening there. And then I think specifically the sensor people. So we've used the LiDAR, yeah, and understand that, but there's the radar, but there's the integration with the car manufacturers, who I think are really at this moment in time setting the pace for this innovation.
How about in Europe? What do we see in Europe? What kind of companies or technologies?
Shall I start?
Yeah, sure. You're fine.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's not that different. With just one world, I think. Everything that maybe started in the US will go further also in Europe. What I see is that the sensor business is going very big. I think we'll use sensors in everything the next years, especially when we want to handle things better or to know things, and for that also the companies who make services on that will grow big. I think. I think that will be a major market. Then, of course, just companies still are growing still big, as Booking.com, etc. That was started here in Enschede, so we know that company from here also. But services to the customer and services between business to business, I think that will grow. Florian.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so it's a wide diversity which companies to select from. Actually, I personally look a lot into semiconductor industries, because they basically do a lot of innovations in terms of getting things small, cheap, and integrated. So from compute to connectivity. It may be something like Qualcomm, of course, which is pushing a lot also in the cellular business, of course. But on the other hand, companies like NXP are really focusing on this type of solutions, also for industries like automotive and industrial. So this is one factor where I see the innovation will come to scale, and the important thing is they also need to combine different aspects on this silicon, so different RF technologies, for example, and of course different compute capacities. And what on the other side, I also see when it comes to companies like Apple, of course they also go into semiconductor development, but they do packaging of all these things in a very interesting way, and build basically the customer access for whatever services software can provide. And I expect that these big companies who do their innovations in that way and have access basically over the devices will be crucial in the future for smart cities, because that's the device which connects then to the bigger network, then providing the services, let's say, coming out of the city and sensor networks. And so these will be the gatekeepers to some extent, I expect.
Thank you. Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of exciting things happening, very interesting of all these technologies and these companies, that what they're doing. We have a question from the audience. So let me read the question, because the person doesn't have a mic. So it's from Kwang Meng Ko. And the question is, with so much data generated with smart everything, how can we ensure security and data privacy? Will countries restrict data to be only in the country with local data centers?
Mm-hmm. Our answer is don't capture the data in the first place. So we have proven out in a proof of concept in San Francisco, but we also see it in other cities, that by using, for example, LiDAR, yeah, or object detection centers that only classify the objects but never record anything, the traffic flow management and operationalization can be done completely anonymously. Now, there's There's no need to ever store a face or a license plate or anything else. We also are doing parking, right, where we do use the license plate recognition and stuff like that to drive billing, and make that as frictionless as possible. There's also no real need to store that. Yeah, so you have to make sure that the different systems are talking with the right level of data, that you should minimize as much as possible, and there should be no need. We do see that cities want to have the data stored even in their own private cloud, so they keep it all internally, and I think those are smart measures, right? On the other hand, by how the AWSs of the world, right, how they have organized their services, you can at a very high level guarantee privacy.
That's, I think as a consumer, that's also very reassuring to hear, because yeah, there is a lot of data, right? But it's good to hear that, not everything has to be stored. So I think for the consumer part, that's very reassuring. Yeah. Anyone else who has a comment on this? Maybe Gerdien?
Yeah, especially in Europe, the cities, the local government, but also the national government is not allowed to store a lot of data, not personal data. So we have to hash and anonymize the data, and we'll do that just in the sensor already, because we're not as companies allowed to gather and store data. So we have to, and it works fine. So it's not necessary. So I agree on Paul.
Yeah. On the other hand, I mean, it's the second part of the question. So the countries are very different, laws are very different, and how things are handled is also very different across the world. So I see more like an inhomogeneous way how things are handled. And on the other hand, you always have at least from the private sector, the push data is the key to make business. And so there will always be a fight for that, and a fight against saving the data and making money out of it. So it's going to be very interesting how that's going to be handled in the future.
Yeah, we've definitely at SFMTA have the experience that startups are selling back our own data. And they say, oh, look at these beautiful insights. And we go, well, we already have the data. We'll generate the insights ourselves if we need them. Right. So it's a constant battle. But it's not only from the companies, I think. It's also from law enforcement. That these kinds of solutions are easily taken to that level. But I think as a world citizen, we have to be really, really careful with that.
Yes, thank you. I see here a question from Dinesh Kitani. How are we integrating data, communication, and also use of wireless power, which is emerging technology for smart IoT devices? Or is there no interest in wireless power technology? Who wants to try to answer this one?
Well, may I go first? I think there's huge interest in wireless power technologies because it's always a question, how long can a device be alive? Of course, you have the smoke sensors, which can be alive for quite some time, sure. But if you go into devices which need to communicate more often, things are critical. So either you have them plugged to a power, or you need to recharge. And if, and that's, I think, a big if, what wireless power technologies will be there, and is there enough power you can transmit through the air? So I think it's kind of a physical limitation to some extent. Then I think that's very beneficial if progress is made. So on the one hand, you have devices which consume less and less power, or let's say have power save modes. So that will be crucial. And I would say today, if you take your phone and you put it on a wireless charger, it gets hot. So things you need to be very close. So I guess this technology needs more time to gather enough power in a good way. And to connect to wireless power units, you still need to be in a good position, and it's not that easy to be very efficient in power transfer. So it's very interesting, but I personally would expect it will take more time.
Paul, your thoughts on this?
I think it's almost a necessity to be able to scale within urban areas. It is very, very expensive to have to dig a trench for power and connectivity, right? To go somewhere, for example, mid-block, and it's very, very disruptive to the environment, and typically it doesn't leave a nice sidewalk or street afterwards, right? So it's it would be huge if we see more and more the ability to collect still large amounts of data. Yeah, I mean a LiDAR sensor, even the lower channel ones, yeah, they collect about 20 to 25 megabytes per second, right? That's, you know, it's not too hard to move that, but if you want to do it wirelessly, consistently, 24 hours a day, yeah, it really adds up. You need like 4 per intersection, and now we're going to do mid-block. So it's, yeah, it's a big thing. I really hope that people are seriously looking into this to make this possible. I think it's absolutely critical.
Yes, and Gerdien, did you also have some thoughts on this?
No, actually, I don't have that. I'm not a technical specialist on that, so no. I think, yeah, sensors need less and less energy, and maybe you can, yeah, you generate energy on the places where you need it with solar energy or something. But wireless, yeah, it's a massive challenge, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like definitely there's interest in it. So if there are any companies working on that, there is a market for you. Now, I see there's a hand raised. So we have Darren McDade. So maybe we can have Darren unmuted so he can ask his question.
Oh, hi. Thank you, Puissant. I had a quick question here. Are there opportunities for cities to generate revenue by licensing this sort of aggregate, not individual data? Like an example would be, you know, city centers see a large gathering of people at, you know, 3rd and L Street. And there's a billboard here. Could you like license these aggregate data so you can target advertising at that particular area where there's a large group of people? That's just one example, but you know, you're collecting all kinds of other things. Is there a way for cities to basically generate revenue from this, which would help them adapt these technologies a lot faster?
Yeah. Maybe Gerdien, maybe you want to give the Dutch perspective on that. I have some thoughts for the US.
Yeah, I think it's different in Europe, especially in the Netherlands or Germany, than in the US. We would like to benefit from it and get revenues from it, but it's, I think it's very hard to get revenues from it, because everybody here would say, and I think it's not allowed to use the data of persons. We're just the only organization that can collect those data. Then we have to be very handle them with handle them. So I think here it's not allowed to do that, only in a very, very small way that benefits ourselves, so that we can help people better in our society, to give better answers. In that way, we can have revenues from it, but not in a way of selling it, but just in a way of make better services for the inhabitants. So it's also a revenue, I think.
Yeah, and that we see the same. I see the same in San Francisco and in some of the other cities. So we are, for example, our proof of concept, right? If we would scale that, yeah, we are able to take millions out of operational costs. Yeah, and it's a direct year-over-year money, public money that doesn't need to be spent. Yeah, and it's typically in the United States, it's funded with local taxes, right? So that's That's one of the benefits where we directly link it back. Optimizing traffic flow as a direct input has a direct result on the greenhouse gas emissions. Yeah, I think I hope that most people now are awake, even if we would take the United Nations for a half of what they have found. The numbers are, as far as I'm concerned, undeniable. There are, however, you bring up the example of billboards, right? But by understanding better, pretty much on a vehicle by vehicle, person by person, even though we can't recognize them, there are immediate opportunities to help them reach, for example, parking better. People are very willing to share that information on a voluntarily basis, and really help them with, okay, find parking, already reserve a little rental bike, right? A little share scooter or whatever last mile opportunities you have. I think there's also opportunities to work together more, instead of seeing them as a city, as a competitor to public transit, with companies like Uber and Lyft, and really integrate with them to, for example, be able to say, you can use the stop, to unload and load passengers, and we're going to tell the drivers when the bus is going to be there, and they better be gone, right? Because otherwise we will take a picture and we will tell you this is not okay, and we'll work with it that way. So now we all of a sudden open up that curb that is typically a restriction, right? And the Uber doesn't have to park anymore in the bike lane, because of course, as a good Dutch boy, I bike around in San Francisco, and the Ubers are the most dangerous ones, right? Because they just unload people, doors open up while they are in the bike lane, right? There's opportunities there. You could also sell all this traffic information. I don't think San Francisco would be willing to do it, but other agencies or other cities might. Right? What if we guarantee that your FedEx or DHL or whatever truck, right, gets a high percentage of green? We can optimize those flows as well. Maybe the garbage collectors, instead of having, again, those diesel trucks sitting in front of the traffic light, tell us where those trucks are, tell us where they need to go, and we'll be able, with understanding what happens at the intersections, to optimize in such a way that that you really don't impact any of the other traffic. And so those are more I think the advantages that we're going to see. Advertising space is not going to happen in San Francisco, but guiding people to our parking garages that maybe are not always full, that's a direct generator of income.
Thank you. I think that we're going to stay with you, Paul, for another question, because I see here a question directed to Meneer Hoekstra. This is from Lamar Heistek. The question is, how does smart everything exacerbate the digitale kloof, or also in English, it's digital divide in the United States? Who is left behind, and what can the government do besides spending more money on the problem?
Yeah, that's of course a thing that, coming from the Netherlands and living in the United States, the divide in the United States is much larger than it is in the Netherlands, right? I'm not saying it's not there in the Netherlands; it's for sure there. I think COVID has really helped in that regard, that a lot of people have become more and more digitally educated, right? People are more and more used to using a smartphone and those ways of getting their information. Now, maybe they don't have not everybody will have, a $1,200 device like the latest and greatest Apple. Yeah, but people will more and more get access to those kinds of devices. So I think that is it's going to really help with making the divide smaller. Another thing that cities are actively working on is really the multimodal kind of way of how do you get around. So how do you get to your bus stop? Yeah, how do you get from that last stop to your work? Yeah, it is public transit in the United States is a larger percentage of people that can't afford a car are using public transit. So now we make it easier for that group of people to use public transit. And there's optimizations that can happen there. So by investing money, yeah, that will have to happen. Hopefully we can take some operational cost out. Yeah, and at the same time, because it's the moment you have it, right? It's easy to scale, easier to scale. Yeah, and focusing in on the people that sometimes left behind first, I think can lift the whole. I can't say the sea anymore because that's really terrible with what we're having going on. But you know, all the boats will go up.
Yeah, there's definitely, as you mentioned, we can see that it's different in the US and in Europe. And in Europe, maybe it's a smaller gap to begin with. But maybe Gerdien or Florian, you want to add and see how that is. Like, is it? I mean, yes, is the gap so small you don't really need to, work on that, or do you still see there are some issues and there's a divide? And how do you do that? How do you make it smaller?
Yeah, I think in Europe, there's a gap. Sure, there's a gap, and it's more not even on age, but also on income. People with less money, they don't have access to computers, mobile phones, or good internet. In the Netherlands, the government is investing in it. There are in the libraries, there's always a space where you can use internet, but also the health organizations here use more and more iPads, especially for giving health on a distance. And that will help also because those groups of people that using it are more the ones that were on the wrong side of the gap. And I think the gap will be smaller, but it still will be there, and we have to invest. There are also civil organizations, they invest in people, especially when they don't have the money, but it's still there. And as a local government, we are not allowed now to give our own information only digital. We still have to publish it in a local newspaper and other ways. We wanted that last year, but was not allowed. So we have to still to manage that in more ways, and we are still doing that. But I think when the old people now above 80, 85, get older, that the group that's used to use a computer or a mobile phone will grow. And even the people that stayed behind. So I hope it's getting smaller.
Yeah, I would agree. And we could see that during the Corona pandemic, or still, where schools need to switch to more like digital ways of interacting, and just a lot of kids couldn't do because they didn't have the tech. Of course, the schools didn't have it either, maybe in that amount, but on the other hand, the kids didn't have it either. And so in that reason, in that regard, governments can do a lot over schools to at least reduce the division here. And of course, yeah, the older generation, needs to get used to that as well. But that's more like not a question of maybe money, but a question of routines.
Yeah, so maybe also a little bit of training for you said the elderly to how to use a new technology would be a way to do it as well. Now we have a question here from Alon Newton. Do you believe the myth and conspiracy theories around 5G will hinder the future 5G wireless infrastructure deployment around the world? And can we reach our IoT goals without 5G deployment?
I'm not at liberty to talk about that.
How about Florian? What do you think?
Yeah, there's a lot of information around 5G, and there also, of course, are these conspiracy theories around as well, and there are also different political actions taken, at least to some part, when it comes to, for example, Huawei technologies, and different governments dealt with it in a different way. So a huge spectrum around the world as well when it comes to that. So personally, I do not see 5G as the holy grail to solve everything. I see much more a multiverse of RF technologies around the world, and the regulators do, in this sense, a good job in terms of providing spectrum. So it is spectrum there for Wi-Fi, which has been extended tremendously in the States by almost more than 1 gigahertz. For example, the same has happened in Europe in a smaller scale. You have possibilities of in the US for CBRS bandwidth, let's say private networks, maybe using also 5G technology, but not in a sense, maybe 5G is understood like 4G was. So so personally, I think it will take some time, and these technologies really get into scale, and we will see a multiverse of it. And I think it's even necessary, because the homogeneous way, the inhomogeneous way of dealing with these technologies from a regulative point of view and business model point of view will generate a multiverse, and a lot of different players will come into the game. So there's more like open Wi-Fi, so more people will be able to work on RF front ends in the future. You have the also the open run in 5G, where a lot of new players come into play, not, let's say, only the ones who sell now, let's say AT&T or the Vodafones, for example. So it will change a lot, and I do not see that there's a strong limit. I see much more movement there. The question is, of course, what is used where, and do you have a connectivity to it?
Yeah, so I think besides 5G, there are also the low orbit internet satellites like Starlink, right? So maybe you can talk a little bit about what else will it take to bring smart everything everywhere?
Yeah, so low orbit internet satellites are interesting, of course, because they generate a complete new way of network architectures, which hasn't been there in the past. So new players will own networks and will control their networks, and as they control it, they kind of neutrality is a little bit off the hook, because they now can provide services and pay and put a euro or a dollar sign to it. So I think that will start, and I don't think it will start in the poor world. Actually, I expect it to happen where already the money is, and people are willing to spend and willing to switch, maybe from other infrastructure operators who provide them now connectivity. So I guess it will offer much more variety for smart technology and services wherever you are and whatever you need. So I think it's opening up the types of business models you can attach to that. And is it ecological right or not? I'm not sure. Yeah, having more satellites above us and more, let's say, light pollution, whatever it's called, and but it's there, and I guess it will play a role in the future. And you can have one more option to select from.
How about Paul and Gerdien? Have you seen anything else that can add to this?
I was joking, of course, a little bit about the 5G question. I think having high bandwidth, low latency available, right, especially in urban areas, is going to help with what I talked about earlier. Yeah, to be able to just throw a cellular device somewhere, right, is going to be huge to move big amounts of data, and very reliable. If we want to if we want to do safety applications, we have to go to something that guarantees the message is being received within a certain amount of milliseconds. And of course, in the United States, we had DSRC. That was very promising, but after, I don't know, 15 years, 20 years, it still hasn't been picked up, right? So the market is definitely not going to switch to that. As far as I'm concerned, we're going to see more and more 5G coverage and applications.
Is there a particular reason like that you can think of why it hasn't picked up?
I think on the demand side, I think there was not enough immediate benefits to enable it within the cars. Right. So what could you in the end do? Leveraging DSRC was very, very limited. There were a couple of proof of concepts, but it has never been adopted at scale. Right. So I think that's kind of like the chicken side, and then the egg side is yeah, it's that if that demand doesn't exist, then people are not going to further develop the technology. It just, the cellular is just surpassing that. Right? 15, 20 years ago, I don't think, I can't really remember, but were we already able to see a video on our cell phone? I don't think so, right?
No, sure not.
Right, and now we're all staring at the tiny little screens, but it better be 4K, and you go, what are we talking about? Right? It's huge. I think the wireless side is that's one of the main keys to unlock the ability to collect and then also reliably take action. To in my case, to set a light or to guide somebody to a parking space.
I like to add something to that too. I agree on Paul. I think 5G will develop anyway because it's there already. And the stories, yeah, they're the stories and people will see. But for transportation, for sensoring, for really reliable, trustful sensoring and data on safety, you need it, I think. And also the companies will need it when they have use it for manufacturing. So I think it will develop further on. And maybe now we will not use it as customers, maybe for the coming years, but sure develops, and maybe even faster than we think now.
Thank you. So I see here a question from Kwang Menko. Which will be the main wireless technologies for smart everything? Is it going to be NB IoT or the CAT-M or something else? So we talked a little bit already, right? But maybe you can say something about the two that are mentioned by Kwang Menko.
I'm not an expert in that field, honestly. Florian, you have an opinion?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. So narrowband IoT has not really picked up, at least as far as I'm concerned. There has been a lot of push from the cellular providers. I'm not sure if the question, if the answer is too narrow here. So I do see a lot of mesh technologies around there. It's maybe wired pass, via DECT. It's maybe 5G, massive IoT enhancements in the future. So I would say it's like Wi-Fi and 5G. So both will be there, yeah. And it's not only cellular. So and the question is, you want to have your city network. It's maybe easier to integrate another chipset instead of a cellular module, because it's also a question of price. And so there is no single answer from my perspective in this sense. So I see cellular and other technologies go hand in hand, and 5G is pushing a lot into this, massive IoT deployments. And I think this will be crucial because these systems are quite powerful, of course. And But in the end, it's a question of how you want to control the networks. Are you able to control the network? Who manage the networks? What is the cost involved? And so there are other factors which count in, and then you decide. So let's see. But I would say it's not one technology, and I see more, and there needs to be a kind of a consolidation. At least I expect that. But there will be definitely more than one or two.
Thank you all for all your questions. And remember, you can also raise your hand if you want to ask the panelists your question. So we see one raised hand here. It's Greenie van Buren. Greenie, maybe you can help her get unmuted. So can Greenie ask the question? Okay, I think we just asked Greenie to unmute. Okay, how about?
Okay, unmute. Am I unmute now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Hi, Greenie.
Okay. Do you think that the 5G is not being used as much because of Huawei? Coming across as being overly aggressive, trying to sell that technology? That's my question.
No, I would say no. I'd say it's in the early rise, and network infrastructure needs to be deployed, and there's kind of transition times where you can lock on 5G and cancel other frequency bands, for example, or other services, so that you have always a transition time. And when it comes to such cellular network deployments, that's the first thing. The second thing is there is more than Huawei in the world when it comes to 5G technologies. So Ericsson is of course also to the pushback from Huawei, but they do a lot of business, and they're selling the stuff. Yeah, and beyond that, there will be, as I said, more open standards. And if you look for NXP, for example, they also offer 5G devices, let's say on the infrastructure side, where you can work on your 5G. And you have, of course, Qualcomm on the other hand, which pushes, let's say, on the mobile side, the chipsets to a, let's say, smaller footprint, makes it cheaper and less energy consuming. And today things are still to some kind expensive, so that's hindering, let's say, the scaling up. I don't see it's the reason for Huawei. It's just, let's say, how this market can be adopted and pushed into products and commercialized.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
And the ability, I think, it just takes a lot of manpower to hang that new infrastructure, right? And it's already very, very full, right? You look around and every single pole has already large antennas on it, and it's also a physical thing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Greenie, for asking the question. Yeah, it was a great question. Now, we talked about the ethics already a little bit, right? About the data, whether or not it can be stored. But maybe, Gerdien, can you answer, will the discussion about the ethical side of the technology, will it actually slow down the development of smart cities?
In the Netherlands, I see just now a big slowing down of it, because especially in the local communities, in the cities, local government, they have to check extra and more on what data they are producing, especially in public domain, and how they are using it, if it's allowed, if it's not allowed, how they're using data about persons. I think it's good to make the check. Later on, I think the development will go on further, but for this moment now, we have especially in the Netherlands and maybe also in Germany, it's time consuming. Let's put it in that way. And maybe it's also good that we are really checking the technology that's anonymized data and that people are not going to be controlled. So, but for now, the ethical discussion is a quite big discussion. It's getting bigger and bigger in the Netherlands. And even the local government where I work, we have an ethical commission. Some people from university also, they are asking us as a local government, what are you doing? How doing it? Do you really think about it in a good way? So they are helping us to ask the right questions and to do some research on it.
Florian, did you want to add on that from like a perspective out of Berlin, Germany? Do you see the same thing happening there?
Well, of course, when I talk about Germany, one example was last year, the introduction of our COVID apps, showing, let's say, have you been close to somebody and things like that. And I certainly can say the discussion about ethics and data and things like that has slowed down, and pushed back that the technology could have been used and could have been saved lives maybe in the end. So I see that as an example that this can happen and will happen. But as I said in other questions and answers, I see that very diverse over the world, and so there's no single pace.
Yeah, and maybe Paul can touch on this a little bit from the US side, because obviously here, you know, you see it in all technology, right? Because ethics is not necessarily the first thing that startups think about. So they just start doing and then they grow, right? So what is your what are your thoughts on this here?
You know, I'll pick one specific subject that is, you know, coming, yeah, and that's the big push for autonomous vehicles. Yeah, and I actually think it is in Germany that there is now a law, maybe you know about this, Florian, maybe you read it somewhere, that an autonomous vehicle, yeah, it cannot make a decision. So sometimes, you know, stuff happens, right? And the car has to make a decision. It will make a decision, right? And there's been this ongoing research, I think it's out of MIT, right? And what should you do in certain situations, right? So in Germany, I think right now the law is that an autonomous car, yeah, it cannot, a self-driving car, it cannot make a decision based on how old somebody is or appears to be, right? What kind of color of the skin, maybe how they move, whatever characteristics of a person, in making determination. Okay, I am going to hit something, right? Am I going to hit this group or that group? Which one am I going to hit? Because they are, in this scenario, they are gonna hit somebody. Yeah, so that's kind of like, it goes to the heart, because you would, you know, intuitively say, all right, if it's a mother with a child over an elderly couple, right? There might be voices that would veer one way or the other. Yeah. So what I think what is going to slow down this whole autonomous vehicle push by the technology companies is a really big discussion that we are to have. Personally, I don't believe that when you are in an urban environment and you know as a pedestrian, if I even pretend to step into the roadway, the car will stop, right? We have no tolerance for Teslas running somebody over, right? That they are going to be highly aware of what's going on, and they will brake when you go out, right? So it only takes one person to do that. The car will stop, yeah. Everybody will cross, and there you go, right? Traffic will become completely at a standstill, right? And I think we are not even starting to talk about how are we going to deal with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's a very good observation of the, yeah, how do you do that? And yeah, that's good to hear that there are people that are thinking about this, right? So we have to get to this part.
Yeah,
It's-
I don't know who
But,
is thinking
yeah.
about it. I don't know who's thinking about it. Are you thinking about that?
Oh, you're
Katie?
thinking about it, Paul. So you're
Yeah,
gonna.
yeah, I'm already trying to provide a technology solution to a society, fact of life, right? We're gonna see these more and more, also, cheaper, because only the rich people can really drive the Teslas. Back to the divide, right? But more and more we'll see self-driving buses and everything else, and increase the service to everybody. I think it's a great good. Yeah, but we do have to tackle some of these things, and I'm by far an expert.
And may I add, so you're completely right. That's another very important and hyped topic, which is completely not really solved ethical. I still believe it's even not solved from a technology perspective completely. Yeah. So if you look into cars, so we're barely at level 3, and when it comes to, of course, there are servers in the US. I'm aware of really free driving, but under really narrow circumstances, as far as I know. But if you want to really scale this technology, then the whole legal framework needs to adapt. And I was part of a discussion a couple of years back, and it was based on, of course, German law. And so what is a digital person? So you have a human person. You have a person as a legal one, like a company, yeah, who has rights. But what is a digital person? So what happens with all these types of agents, digital agents, which do something, yeah, and who is responsible for that, and
Who owns them? Yeah,
and who owns them, and who takes care of wrong decisions of it, if it's maybe ordering pizza way too many because for whatever reason, yeah. So these things are not really solved. Because there are no cases really to solve, and I think these things take much more time. And the only thing which I guess is the way forward, where technology will at least show its capabilities, is in complete new cities, where you basically from scratch you're able to distinguish and separate traffic and things like that, and that basically takes off the legal thing.
that's what I want to build a complete new 10 million people city here in the United States, right? How cool would that be?
Or you can maybe take it to Mars, making you think about how we're going to do over there. That way you can start all over.
No, I'm not going to Mars.
Well, I see a hand raised, but I also saw Gerdien was unmuting. So I don't know if Gerdien wanted to add to this conversation before I go to the next person.
No, I think a lot of things have been said. I think it's quite nice discussion in this way. And ethical questions are easy to make and very difficult to be answered. So I think, and when the discussion is further, then you get laws. Then you make rules about it in law. So at first, before the law, you have the ethical discussion always, and it's good, I think. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Gerdien. So the hand from Peter. Maybe we can unmute Peter.
Yeah, I can unmute myself because I have the power. Yeah, thank you for letting me speak also here. So it would not be an IoT session or a connected session if I would not ask my question always. Actually, two questions. One question was answered by Florian already. Who owns the data which are here in the world? Nobody knows it directly. But my second more important question is, who is in charge with all these billions of connected things, everything? Who is in charge if something goes wrong? Perhaps you can answer the question. I'm involved in machine-to-machine IoT since many, many years. I didn't get an answer. So who owns the right to do something? Who is in charge if something goes wrong? Is it Mr. President? Is it your Chancellor in Germany? I have no idea.
I would even say the question is even more difficult to answer, because it really starts if you have pushed out your devices. How does who does the device management, who takes care about that the right updates are taken, from a security perspective, for example, right? Who really manages these devices in the future. So this is difficult to do, yeah, and somebody needs to do it. And of course, if you forget one of these devices, and it's kind of one way into such huge networks, you may not have the overview anymore, then things are getting complicated and maybe also dangerous. I'm not sure if that was your specific question, but at least I.
No, this is actually an answer which I get since years. So, for example, Jadim, you're in charge of a smart city in Enschede. What happened if the Grolsch factory, for example, my greetings or my regards to Grolsch beer, what happens is there? So you have control about this factory. That's okay. This factory is connected to a shipping company. So probably you can also combine these two companies. What happens with bus system? Complete city. Who is in charge to hit the button and say, okay, boom, it's out? Is it the mayor? And then I ask Netherlands. Who is Netherlands? Who is Europe? And then the rest of the world. Because everything is connected.
Yeah,
and Florian, you're right. Yeah, it's not clear right now. Nobody really knows who's in charge to hit the button.
Yeah. I think there are no buttons. There are a lot of buttons, thousands, millions of buttons. But as a city, we don't have one button. We're just afraid that with the big attack, the digital attack, we will fail in our infrastructure. Digital infrastructure will fail. That's a big threat, I think. But we don't have buttons in the other way around.
Right.
Maybe it's good to think about it. Yeah.
Probably Arnold Schwarzenegger will come in Terminator 17 or so, and then we have the solution.
through 5G then, right? No, I think in the end, people own things, right? People or companies or agencies, they own things. And with owning things that have greater power comes a larger responsibility and accountability. And I think the question is not who owns the data, yeah, but are we holding those companies, agencies, people responsible for it? Yeah, so in other words, if you own the data, if Facebook owns the data that is on Facebook and harm is being done with that data, I think they have, personally, my opinion is they have a responsibility. They are in some way accountable for whatever is on their platform. Yeah, and I think that, to me, that's very clear. They own it, right? Nobody else can erase that data. It's their data. We've all signed our data over to them, all our cute little cat pictures. Yeah, they can own it. If you read the, I asked for my middle school girl, right? She started using these Chromebooks. Fantastic devices. They can work together with these Chromebooks. A blessing in disguise with COVID. They were ready. These kids were ready for it. And when you read the user agreement, yeah, then it is very clear who owns what. Yeah, we can ask for the data to be deleted. Yeah, but the analysis done on top of that data is owned by Google. Right, so it's not that far-fetched that they have already, in Florian's terms, right, the digital twin of my daughter. And if one of their services is to advise, back to my friends at MIT, right, if she would apply there and they would say, okay, in this region, it doesn't even have to be exactly the person, but who was really good at math and it came naturally and they were creative thinkers versus somebody who works really, really hard. I don't think it's that far-fetched that by knowing exactly every single keystroke my daughter made to put her in one of those categories. Yeah, so that's what Google owns. It's very clear here. I think what we as the people don't realize is the power of those companies owning that kind of data. Yeah, I think it's very, very clear. Yeah, we are kind of like still in a sheep state of our evolution on the digital scale. And as people, we need to start realize that maybe that digital twin, that is actually me. And I own that. And I just don't need, you know, companies like Google having that information for their own benefit. Yeah, if they were not there for profit, then they would be a .org. But they are not. They are here to make money for the shareholders. And that's the only reason they exist.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting perspective on it, as in, you know, it's yeah, they get the data, they own it. But then you can also talk about, you know, what do they do with it then, right? And then also, do they have to keep it only to themselves, or should they make it public, right? Because it is, you know, data that otherwise, if it's collected by a public agency, would be made public, right? So
Not necessarily.
I'm sorry?
Not necessarily, right? So if you count how many people are in a bus, yeah, that's public data.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But counting how many times you are on that bus and did you sit in the front or in the back, that I don't think that's anybody's business.
Thank you for the differentiation, Paul.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, thank you very much for raising your hand to ask the question. I just want to, if you want to ask a question to our panelists, then yes, please raise your hand so we can pull you up here and then you can ask them directly. Let's see, let's talk about you know, with Paul, some of these questions, we already talked about the communication, right? But from your perspective, from the traffic flow perspective, wireless is what makes communication between all the necessary pieces. So, but then you have like, who is talking to who? And then when you talk about autonomous driving, and you went into a little bit already, but are cars going to be able to talk to each other? Or, you know, how do they talk? I mean, can they talk to the pedestrian? And what about the infrastructure? I mean, who orchestrates all of this, right? And then what is the language? Like, you know, we're talking here in English, but how do cars talk to each other? Like, what's the language they use?
Yeah.
Can you answer some of these questions?
So I think the jury is still out on that one. I think there will be a certain amount that there will become more and more standards for cars to talk to each other. Yeah, and that's going to be a great good, because then one car can just tell the one behind it, I'm going to brake and this is how hard I'm going to brake. Yeah, and it will take a lot of guessing out of interpretation of the sensors. Yeah, I think that's going to be great. I also think that, you know, if for a really reasonable price, I could stitch a sensor in the backpack of my daughter and cars would know where that sensor is, not my daughter, but just that sensor, right? And that would be a really good thing too, that cars would talk in that way. If you go one level up, right? And, you know, maybe this works for you. I'm sure it's going to work for Florian, right? If you're thinking about a factory and the boxes are moving through that warehouse or through that factory, right? The boxes can talk to each other. Yeah, but what we figured out is if you put a layer on top of that to manage all the different boxes, yeah, it becomes, you are capable of optimizing it much better. Yeah, because you can oversee from a bird's eye, you know, what's happening in the city, where's the demand coming from, and what your constraints are really, right? Your bottlenecks. Yeah, and I think that's where we're going to talk with the infrastructure. It's going to have a bidirectional conversation with sensors in the people, sensors in cars, sensors in the roadway, backend systems, probably payment systems, right? And it will help to optimize the whole. Yeah, so we're all benefiting from it. That will also, you know, mitigate that some of the cars will talk a different language or no language at all. Right? I don't think we want to have no more, you know, 1969 Ford Mustangs convertibles in our streets, right? We know they're smelly and we're glad it's not every other car, but it's kind of like fun that we still enable that kind of technology to drive around. Yeah, but I think the jury is still out. I don't have an answer. This is how we're going to talk to each other.
Thank you, Paul. Florian, Jardine, do you have anything to add to this, or maybe some of these questions you see in other parts of the whole ecosystem? So maybe not just the traffic flow, but from another perspective that you've seen.
Yeah, what's quite developing yet here is mobility as a service. It's not only connecting, talking the cars between them, but you as a customer, as wants to travel, you can easily manage your traveling around just by car, by bus, or anything. And we do that also for more public transportation for people with who are disabled. So there are going to be, can get easy from one place to another. So yeah, I think traffic is about cars who are talking to each other, buses also, but we have already have that, I think, for a bit with traffic lights who are communicating with buses and ambulances and etc. Yeah. And we'll see. I think, yeah, what's the best way is to communicate it will be, I think, or what the most cheap way is. And I think as customers, we can communicate with pedestrians as with our smartphones. I think that will happen also. So I think in that way. And I hope more and more people are not taking the car, but taking the bicycle or go walking or public transport. That's what we are aiming on here in Enschede. And I know that they are aiming in San Francisco also. So that's a big shift we're trying to make here.
Maybe I would add more like a general view, which at least is happening in manufacturing as well. So you always have the question, where is your control loop? Where is the intelligence basically put in, right? So the more you have decentralized, maybe put in the car by more sensors, the less you need to communicate at least to a central system, because a lot of things are happening and decided on site. You can also go the other way around, where then communication plays a bigger role in this sense, and you may gain from, let's say, the knowledge in the network and not from your local sensors. So and this is then decided also by the complexity and cost, and how can you control such systems. Just a general remark, but so in the end, the question is, what service do you need at what level, let's say, of hierarchy in the networks? Yeah, so you have, it's a very local environment. There you maybe have your own sensors, or let's say very small decentralized network technologies running around, and then you may have, let's say, higher control systems which organize in the flow, as you explained, and based on that, the architectures will work, or will be laid out, and one important thing, at least in that area, there will be communication standards. So when it comes to language, there will be more drivers to a homogeneous way of communicating, and you can see that in a lot of areas. So and I guess this trend will go on.
Yeah, and it's also and you were saying, how do the consumers talk, or for example, Uber, we use a phone, right? There are apps on the phone. I'm kind of interested to hear if you've seen any developments or technology that you don't necessarily have to use the phone, or we just really focus on the phone, because then we get back to that question what we had earlier about the digital divide, right? There, are we getting to the point that everyone has a phone? I don't know, but I don't think, it looks like it because we're here in the Bay Area. It looks like everyone has a phone, but maybe in some countries they don't have a phone, and not the data or the, how do you say it, the wireless connectivity, right, to get on these platforms. So yeah, so it's gonna be, yeah, I'm interested to hear if there are other solutions out there.
They also don't have Uber.
maybe
No,
that's it. They also don't have the problem, and they don't
well,
need that.
no, I don't think they have there's a whole other problems, right?
Yeah.
No, I say this new technology is going to prevent people that don't have access to the technology or the connectivity to benefit from these kinds of new solutions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see another way. I don't know, Gerdine or if you have other opinion, but
No, I think more and more people will have access to mobile phones. It's growing and growing. And in the Netherlands, I think everybody has a mobile phone. Even my father from 93 years old has his mobile phone. So yeah, and he uses it also. But I think it will growing. And if you don't have it, you're not interested in, I think, things like Uber or something else. And then you find it in a different way, or you ask your children or grandchildren to help maybe, or neighbors.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I even would say, even in poorer countries, or let's say that maybe in the not so developed areas, you can see that the mobile phone is even predominant already to some extent for a lot of services, where in our world things have been gradually built, infrastructure has been built, that's there, and in these countries it's not. So what you can see, they jump basically these development steps. So and phones get cheaper and cheaper. So it's what you get for $100 or €100 already. It's amazing. And the wireless technologies are typically also deployed.
Okay, it's Peter Walter again. Time for a little break and also time for the raffle, because everybody is waiting. Everybody wants to win. And we draw the raffle winner. No, why we cannot see it right now? Okay, now it works, yeah. The winner is, let me see, Randall 5. Randall, I think we know each other. You are the winner of this wonderful globe light. Please send me your email, send me your address, so we will ship this stuff directly to you. And if it is there, if you're switched on, just send us a picture so we can post your prize and your raffle win on our website. With this, congratulations, Randall. And again, I switch over to Puisan to continue with this wonderful event.
Congratulations, Randall. So I certainly learned so much today, and I hope all of you watching as well. So any last call for questions from the audience? Any questions before I go over to ask our panelists for their final thoughts?
is the question from Anthony? Have we? I don't think we've addressed it. That I've seen about promising technologies for helping something besides the headline grabbing.
Okay, yeah, we can. So yeah, the Anthony Very wants to know if there are any promising technologies that today that can help address some of these less attention-grabbing headlines versus drones, autonomous vehicles, but such as clean water, food, healthcare, homelessness. What have you seen?
if I may start, I think in healthcare, wireless communications getting more and more important. People don't have to go to the doctor anymore or the hospital. The doctor can see when you're at home just by your mobile phone or your iPad. I think that's a tremendous achievement. So if you're far from a hospital, you can be helped. And also in developing countries, it can be a massive solution to a lot of challenges. So I think that's a big achievement from wireless communication, and will help in healthcare, and also getting people connected when they're lonely or far away. At first, yeah.
Thank you, Ferdine. Paul?
It's really outside of my realm. I just see concepts appear that, speak to that. And I think we're pushing a lot with the drones and autonomous vehicles and in that area. And that's maybe what we see, but the fundamental research and technology and developments that are behind it, is, I think we'll see a lot of that in the future.
Anything to add to that, Florian?
Well, it's I'm just making my mind about it. I think there are a lot of technologies we are not really aware of that they exist and are in use. When it comes in the recycling business, when you read some articles, what's happening there, how, let's say, vision technologies enable faster, more strict separation of waste, for example, than enabling more recycling. That's just an example which just pops up my mind, which I think it's quite important in our very wasted world. Yeah, and and also clean water, I guess, which is I just may refer to one of Bill Gates' initiatives. He's doing a lot about clean water and sanitation in not so developed countries. So it's not about really high technology. It's building systems which are practical and usable. So it's not only, as I said, technology. It's really have practical, cheap, scalable solutions, and it's just maybe good engineering to some extent. So that would be my 5 cents to that.
Yeah, and it's also interesting to look at this past year, right? The pandemic, there are things in society that creates those opportunities, right? And the pandemic definitely has created a lot of opportunities for, like Zoom has taken off. But when you talk about healthcare, now I think maybe that's still a little bit also ongoing. So we'll see some things happening there as well. We see it in education here in the US. Definitely, we noticed when schools had to put everything online. The first question was, how do you do that equitable, right? Then you start giving the kids computers, right? But then came the question, now not all kids have access to wireless access, right? So then they had to work towards, how are we going to make it more accessible? Like they have the hardware and the software maybe, but then they also need the connection. So yeah, this is there's a lot of technologies happening every day, and luckily also addressing all these things that are happening that are not necessarily in the news. Okay, any other questions? So this is my last call for questions. You can raise your hand, put it in a chat, anything. We've discussed so much. I have learned so much, but this is your last chance to ask the question to the panelists before we wrap it up. Okay, I want to personally also thank all our panelists here today, Ferdine, Florian, Paul. I have learned so much, and thank you so much for enlightening us about smart everything. And I personally feel so much smarter now. So thank you for that. Before we go, I want to ask our panelists again, one last round of parting words for all of us. Who wants to start first? Ferdine.
Just do a quick thinking. I think smart cities is just a word, a term for it, but it's going about innovation and everything. For every challenge we have, we always will find, we're looking for innovations. And data and wireless communication will bring us a lot of new innovations, whatever we call it. So I think it will change the world and how we connect and how we communicate a lot, I think, also the next years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ferdine. Paul?
Well, I think, you know, when we started with what did you see the last 5 years and what about the future, right? And I'm just really hopeful, and I can't wait to see what, you know, the next generation is going to do what we're building today. I think it's going to be absolutely amazing.
Thank you, Paul. Florian.
Well, hard to say final words. I think it's important for us to get a better understanding of the technologies which are out there, and what happens with it, what happens with the data, and who owns it, and who works with it, who does business with it, and not neglecting also nice servers and just forget about that, what's happening around that. So I think it's much more important to get more educated on these things, on these technologies. First, not to be scared, but also to have a good decision around that. And I think there's so much marketing around, and you need to be careful to draw your conclusions out of it. So at least some general words.
Thank you, Florian. Peter, should I turn it back to you?
Thank you very much for this wonderful event. I learned again a lot, and I learned also that we, WCA, got a lot of ideas again from this panel to follow up on other events like wireless power, of course, AI, machine learning, who is doing really something with this data. I found out only the people who print the money, like hedge funds and so on, they need all this data. How many trains go from the East Coast to the West Coast? How many people go into Starbucks, into Home Depot? Besides predictive maintenance for factories. Anyway, so we will follow up on all these great ideas with events the following months and years. Please sponsor us to make these events possible. We will go back live. We try to do this in September for the Oktoberfest, but here in Santa Clara, we have a lot of restrictions, so we canceled it. It will be an Oktoberfest at home again. Our most likely first live event will be in November for What's Hot. It will be hopefully made in Silicon Valley Bank, where we will have a hybrid. So with this, final words, thank you so much on the panel and also on the attendees who listened to this event. We will see you again, hopefully in September 2nd, where we talk about security and hardware attacks, how to avoid this. Thank you very much. Greetings to Enschede, actually. Enjoy your beer, Grolsch. I had this last week when Marcel was here in my house. He brought a 6-pack of Grolsch. We enjoyed it. And me from Germany and Florian from Germany, we have to give them some credit beer-wise. It was really tasty. Yeah? It's not too bad. Yeah? Marcel probably will not like me anymore after this. Yeah. Anyway, long story short, thank you so much. Greetings to Europe. Thank you to the moderator, Prasad, for a very, very moderator. We will come back to you in another event because you did such a great job. With this, I wish you a wonderful evening, wonderful day here in the US, to the East Coast, everywhere where you are. And talk to you soon, latest in September. If you have a question to the WCA, go to our website or send me an email, peter@wca.org. See you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. See you. Bye.